Okay, so after providing all this gargantuan amount of information about the rules and the mechanics, it's time to try to gradually incorporate all those into viable strategies for beginners. So, this is the setup, and let's get into the setup a bit. There are some few printed pieces that are standard in each game. For example, the French start with a 3 combat value 14 Lorraine, which represents the infamous Maginot line. Also with 4 combat value fleet in England, which represents their naval power. Also 1/4 in Gibraltar, which is pretty important, and one infantry unit in Karachi, modern Pakistan. And pretty much the rest of the units is wild. It is cages, and you choose what to build in its area. For example, you can build some cages in Rome, 4, and some more in Germany. And right now I have made an all-around willy-nilly setup, which includes a little bit of everything. And it is pretty important after a few games to start your game with a plan. So during the setup, you set up your units depending on your early game plan. For example, let's look at the Russians. As a Russians, you have placed one cadre in the Urals, which is pretty far away from the action at first glance. But if you notice closely, a tank with its movement allowance of 3 may even reach Tehran in a single move. And also you've got 2 cadres in Baku. So, for example, an early game plan would be to build one tank here and one infantry tank here, for example. And during your 1936 first production, you may upgrade those, and then you may opt to further upgrade them in your 1937 production. And with a simple move, you can bring one tank, 1, 2, 3 moves into Tehran, and also use your infantry with its 2 movement allowance to attack Tehran. And this tank can go 1, 2, 3, so as to take advantage of this border as well, because you can cross its mountain with 1 unit. So for example, 1 unit from here, 1 unit from here, and 1 unit from here. So this is a simplified early game plan. In this way, you take full advantage of the land borders in order to make a full value of your attack in Tehran, because if you notice the battle chart, the 2 combat value fort that will be deployed in Persia is pretty strong. It can hit ground units at a die roll of 1 to 4, and it does so twice. So for example, this die roll means 2 hits into your ground units. So you need quite a punch in order to destroy this fort. So by this simple game plan, you have to notice the map and take advantage of the border limitations. And right now you've got a really good chance to destroy the fort in Tehran. And if you do so, you gain control of all of Persia, as well as all the resources and population. Also, I would like to remind you of the sea invasion mechanic. Suppose we are the Germans and we try to conquer Denmark, which is a pretty good idea to do early in the game because it secures you one relatively easy resource and also opens up the path for Norway and Sweden, or even possibly a sea lion invasion of Britain later on. So, if you violate the neutrality of Denmark, a 1 combat value fort will be deployed. And again, if we look at the chart, it is pretty likely that it will deal 1 hit onto our ground units. So, suppose we want to conquer it, and in our 1936 production, we have built up some infantry units. Now our main limitation is that this straight border can only host one ground unit, so you can bring 1-2 combat value infantry and that's it. But you can also see invade with a ground unit of 2 combat value from here, and you arrange those separately to indicate that this one has invaded. And in this case, most likely one infantry of yours will take a hit, but notice that while this one has invaded and cannot attack, it can very well absorb the damage, so he's kind of a mid-shielding unit. So the fort deals one hit, and you allocate the hit to this unit, so this one unit that has advanced overland can attack twice, and with a die roll range of 1 to 3 it is pretty likely that it will destroy the fort. Or even if it doesn't, you can later on bring some more units, one sea invader and one overland. So next time most likely the fort will fall and you will conquer Denmark. Now notice that it wouldn't be of any use to bring 1 combat value infantry units, because you have to allocate the hit to the highest combat value unit. So if you see invade with a 1 combat value 1, then the hit has to be allocated to the overland advancing one. So at least try to be careful about this. Now things get increasingly harder when talking about 2 combat value forts like the one in Stockholm, and Sweden is very important because it provides 2 resources to the Germans if you control Stockholm. So suppose we deploy a 2 combat value fort in Stockholm. The task is increasingly harder for the Germans because let's say we use this land border to bring a 2 combat value infantry. We need some 2 combat value infantry to shield it. So for example, you can she invade from Denmark, and this one can mid-shield this one unit for 1 hit, but the second hit has to be allocated to this one, which would be disastrous. So in this case, maybe there are some technologies that could save the day, like this one, landing ship tanks. So if you have this technology, you can bring 1 unit overland, and then 2 more units can use this coastal border, which normally would be 1. So in this case you can amphibious land this one from here and this one from here, and now these 2 can mid-shield the 2 hits generated by the fort. So if we allocate the hits here, this one has some pretty good chance to deal damage to the Swedish fort. So early on in the game you might like to dig in the investment deck a bit for some useful technologies. Now I would also like you to be very mindful of the order in which players conduct their movement. For example, in this case we are in spring, and the western player has played an I command card, and the Axis player has played the P command card. So the western player is to play first, and he has to be very careful, because if he wants to invade Cyrenaica, the Axis player does not even have to take the fight in this case, because in combat he can retreat, and since he's got a unit in the Mediterranean which is adjacent, he can retreat this unit, and during his own turn he can play his movement, and he can bring the tank here for example, plus bring some unit into the Eastern Mediterranean, and now this guy is out of supply. So in many cases you want to have the last letter of the season so as to determine which unit gets to be unsupplied and which not. So when you are the first to play, be very mindful of what kind of maneuvers the enemy can use to cut you off supply. Another mechanic I would like you to be very mindful of is the retreat and rebase limitations. Suppose Spain is west controlled and the Axis player has for some reason conducted an invasion onto Barcelona. Now, this guy can only rebase his ANS units through Mediterranean. So, if for example this tank amphibiously invades and this ship attacks, and if for example he destroys this infantry or the infantry decides to possibly retreat, now there is no retreat path for the infantry because you cannot retreat the way the attacker came, and these areas are not friendly to you. So you have to take the fight, and if this infantry dies, there is no retreat path for any of these units because you cannot retreat the way the attackers came. So without any valid retreat or rebase route, and I remind you that the rebase route has to first follow the retreat restrictions, so you cannot retreat this way in order to rebase, these two units are doomed to be eliminated because there is no ground support for them, and the French control this territory because of their ground unit in the name of this 3 combat value tank. So these ones are done for. I remind once more that ANS units without ground support in a disputed area where the enemy has ground units have to retreat following the normal rebase or retreat restrictions. So in this case, these two without any axis ground support and versus the ground unit of the French have to retreat, and without any retreat or rebase valid path, they are eliminated. And to extend the example a bit further, if this sea is controlled by the west, this one has to trace supply. So since he cannot find supply anywhere, all these adjacent areas are hostile to you, this one will die of supply attrition, and this one have to follow a rebase path. So this one cannot go anywhere and will die of attrition, but this one will survive by going below the ship and reaching Milan after all. Because in this case there is no retreat from a combat, so you can use your normal movement allowance and the restrictions and bypass the British fleet in order to reach your destinations because it is a submarine. Okay, let's move on to the optional rebase rule. What I want you to really understand is that optional rebase does not mean optional retreat. So for example, the Germans are conducting an amphibious assault onto Paris using this ground unit for example, and they accompany it with some ships. If all these attack Paris and none of them retreats during combat, then after this battle they can optionally rebase by following the normal movement restrictions. So for example, they can reach Germany or some other friendly area to them, but they cannot optionally retreat the way they came. This means that during your optional rebase move, you cannot alter the control of sea. So this North Sea will be left unoccupied after combat, with the dire consequences of these ground units being cut off supply by the English player occupying the North Sea. So when you do some kind of amphibious assaults like this one, make sure to have the seas below you protected. Otherwise, a single enemy unit occupying this area may result in your ground units massively dying out of supply attrition. So all in all, there might be a lot of dice rolls throughout the game, but it only amounts to a small portion of the game. Mainly, it is a game of maneuver, a chess-like one, and at some point you will also need some good dice rolls. But mainly, you try to outmaneuver and outflank your enemy and cut off his supply. Because think about it, if you make sure he has no supply, his units will die for sure. If you take combat, the outcome is dubious. So when you can make sure he loses his supply, you usually prefer to do this. Another weird mechanic of the game is the so-called three-way fight. I shall clarify the rule now once and for all. When there is a three-way fight, meaning units of all three factions coexisting in the same area, then the active player, if triggering combat, can choose which unit he targets, and this faction will be the defender for this combat only, and only the defender's units can fire back. So let's examine this late war scenario. The Americans have invaded Ruhr, and they are also threatening to conquer Berlin. The Soviet player finds himself in the awkward position of trying to buy some time for the Germans before the Allies win the game outright. So he decides to reinforce Berlin. So, for example, if you move here with your units, after whatever happens in this fight, the American player has to come and fight you. So if he uses this border, for example, to invade Berlin, and if he kills the German units, control reverts to the Soviets, who were there first as the owners of the area, because the Germans were the first to be there, then came the Soviets, and then the Americans. So more particularly, if the Germans are here, they are the owners. And if the Soviet player comes here, he is the aggressor. And then, if the Americans come here and kill the Germans, they make Soviets kind of the owners of this place. So it might be a good idea as the Soviet player, if you come here with your unit, to have this 3 combat value unit infantry to target the air forces, for example, instead of the fort. The die roll range for the air forces is pretty low, so even if you kill it, which won't necessarily be the case, you have saved this fort, and this fort will defend against the Americans in favor of the Axis, and this will buy you some time as the Soviets to advance your game plan elsewhere on the map. Also, I'm pretty surprised nobody has been asking online about the scenario of a three-way sea battle, because it is very much possible. Suppose the West and the Soviets are rivals, they are not at war with each other yet, and the Axis player is at war with both of the two other factions. So if they move here, it is a three-way battle again. So in this case, of course, he can choose which faction to attack, but this has to be for one combat round. And for example, if he targets the Western player, and whether the Western player retreats or is destroyed, then during the next combat round, he has to choose the Soviets, because they are still enemies, and only one player has to be left alive during the naval combat. And it is not explicitly clarified by the rules, but the most logical conclusion is that during each combat round you specify which faction is the defender. Now, I might have been talking a lot about naval battles and ships and carriers, but when talking about overland advances, like what the Germans want to do in the Soviet Union, the best units to combine are the ground units and the air forces, of course, because these are the ones to do the hard work of destroying the enemy forts. It's barely worth mentioning that the forts are the best defensive units in the game. Their die roll range is pretty good, especially against the ground units. So you might want to either combine your ground forces with your air forces in order to take them down and make the most value out of your units, because you will notice that your main limitations oftentimes is the border limits. So here you can only enter with 3 ground units, but you can boost all this army with some nice aeroplanes, and these are not subject to the land border limits, so you can bring as many air forces as you like to boost your strength in the land areas you are invading. Or the other option is to simply do a kind of reconnaissance mission using your airplanes solely in order to find out what kind of units the enemy has in this area. And notice that if we consult the chart again, the die roll ranges of the forts against the air forces are not particularly strong. They only hit air forces at a die roll range of 1 or 2. So it is very possible that your air forces come back unscathed, and they can also deal significant damage to the fort by bombarding them with their 1 die rolls. So if they roll like 7 dices in this case, it is pretty likely that 1 or 2 of these dice rolls will be 1. So this would preemptively damage the fort before sending your ground forces in to take it on. So during the setup, the Axis player is allocated 14 action cards, which is a whole bunch of action cards if you ask me. And the Soviet player gets 6 cards, and the Western player gets 8 cards. So the German player has to decide what to do with his early action cards, and mainly he's on a haste to gain some initiative through his diplomacy early on in the game, because if he doesn't make some good ground early, he is doomed to be sandwiched in both fronts by the West and the Soviets, just like what happened in the First World War, which is something we try to avoid. So, as the Germans, do yourself a favor, and during your initial allocation of cards, try to sort them out so that you have, for example, 2 spring cards, 2 summer cards, and 2 fall cards, so that you can use these 6 cards for the subsequent 1936 and the 1937 seasons. I remind your hand limit is 7, so there is no problem regarding that. So if you save these 6 cards from your starting hand, then you don't have to commit any of your production in 1937 in drawing action cards, and you can spend your entire production in building up your beloved military units, for example. Now you will notice that diplomatically Axis player is favored in regards to some certain countries like Austria or Sweden or, for example, Hungary, which are countries that historically joined the Axis alliance or remained neutral to the Germans. So this is a pretty good historical representation of what you want to do early in the game. So with this said and done, it's time to proceed to the specific strategy tips for each faction, starting with the Germans, who are the most complicated ones because they want to make all the initiative early. So, who are we? The Axis player. And what do we want? Resources. Reason being, if you take a look at our production track, our resources start very low, at 6, which might not be a problem for our initial production of 1936 because we only take into account population and industry. But if we want to declare war upon another player, or if another player declares war upon us, then this is going to be a problem, and this will be limiting our production capabilities. So early on, we want to either diplomatically or militarily conquer countries that will provide us some resources to play with and further build up our army. So at the start of the game, we've only got some scattered cadres here and there because there has been a war lost a few years prior, and due to the Treaty of Versailles, we are only allowed to have a limited amount of army, which we want to gradually be building up by violating the Treaty of Versailles, of course. So, as a German player, especially, you have to come into the game with a certain game plan, which might be, for example, to build up a strong army to attack Paris early on. So, in between us and Paris, there are the Low Countries. And if we want to attack Paris, it would be next to suicidal to attack through the Maginot Line. So, we want to do what Manstein actually did, which is violate the Low Countries and then advance through them to Paris. Paris does not start strong early, but if you let them build up, then they might be a problem and a tough nut to crack. So one way would be to subjugate Low Countries diplomatically and then use this pass to advance your forces through this beautiful plains border, which can suit 3 ground units. Now, one early game dilemma is how much you want to play with the Italians, if at all, or divert all of your production into the Germans. Personally, I like building up the Italians early on. Reason being, there's a lot of beautiful resources close to Italy. So if, for example, you build up some infantry or tanks, for example, you can very easily violate Croatia and get this one resource, and you can also amphibious land into Greece and support this advance with an amphibious assault into the undefended Albania and then an overland advance into Greece, and you can secure this resource, and then it is very possible to secure this resource as well by using the Italians. As far as Middle East and North Africa is concerned, these are pretty long distances, so tanks are arguably the best units to take on the enemy, and it could even be a 2 combat value tank walking this distance and using the surprise attack effect of the declaration of war to attack first onto the enemy tank and take it down easily in order to secure these beautiful resources for the Axis player. So Italians are pretty useful early, but you might opt for a different path that focuses on building up the Germans and use the Germans to conquer Denmark or Scandinavia or attack Paris or even London. You will notice too that there are some submarines in the Italian armory, and you might be wondering what would be the best use of them. I remind you that at the game start, you are rivals with the West, so you are not at war, which means these units can use this strait in order to exit out in the Atlantic. So if you do a kind of this move, you can do this in spring of 1936, and these units can very early, or maybe even later, start being a nuisance to the Western player, because the Western player's main concern is blockade. There's a whole lot of resources that will have to be shipped through West Indian Ocean and then all around Africa into the South Atlantic Oceans. So while the submarines are not really useful in combat, they can be deadly at blockading the enemy's resources and population. So if they occupy some strategic spots like this one, or this one. And of course, you might want to build them up a bit before sending them out. Then one naval unit would only have a time limit of one combat round to destroy them, because even if it deals one hit, then after the submarine survives this combat round, it can escape downwards. So all this path is blockaded for the allies. So submarines are very good at this particular task. And I will further add onto this by saying that it's really important for the Western player to have some influence onto America in order to secure these resources. And a single submarine may blockade this area, the North Atlantic Ocean. Or if things go really well, you might even want to fully blockade the British island and only leaving the British these two resources, which is of course a much harder task. But think about this. Even if they kick you out of here, if they attack, you can retreat further and maintain this series of blockades. Now, back into Germany. You might want to mainly be playing the Italians and just build up a series of fort seats here. So, for example, commit 3 of your production in building up some forts here. And this small amount of infantry might be sufficient to obtain your early game objectives, like conquering Denmark, for example. And you might want to otherwise play defensively in Germany, at least early on. Or the other options would be, for example, instead of building one fort in each German homeland area, build up an infantry so that the other players might think you are building up forts. And then in 1936 you build them up, and in 1937 you keep building them up, and suddenly in 1938 you've got 3 infantry guys of 4 combat value. And then, surprise, you attack low countries, you take a bunch of hits, and then you invade Paris. And all of a sudden, the Paris fort might be caught off guard and fall immediately. This might be a tricky tactic, but even if you destroy their friends and take them out of the game, which is very good in order to obtain these 2 resources, this does not guarantee you the win, because you have to take down London or Leningrad, which will be increasingly harder. So you might opt to first target London by using the surprise element of the declaration of war, for example. And there's a pretty sound argument that the best build-up for the Germans in 1936 would be like this one, or even this one. So if you build some 8 combat value of ships, you can use your spring 1936 to attack the British, and after taking a bunch of hits from a fort and a possible carrier, then you can first fire the British fleet, which is their whole early game power element. And if you manage to decimate it enough, then the British will stop being a threat all around the Atlantic. And then you can advance your plan of possibly fully blockading the English island, and then you can finish off London and Paris, possibly. However, the counter to that is that the English player might simply bring a unit into North Sea if he is playing first. So in this case, after you declare war, and I remind you have to do this before moving any of your units, then after having declared war, you cannot bypass this area in order to attack London. You have to stop here and take a useless fight, which will be a waste of time to you. Also, another counter to that might be the naval radar technology. So if the Western player digs in the investment deck a bit and manages to obtain this technology from the get-go, then it is GG, well played for your ships in the Atlantic and around England, because now he can attack first and he can use his 4 combat value innate British fleet in order to take you down. In this case, you might be forced to invest more heavily on the investment deck as well in order to find this technology and match this one. Now, as we previously noted, air forces are the best units for reconnaissance missions and to take down enemy forts. So, as a German player, you might want to start building these ones up during the 1936, 37, 38 production, and also search the investment deck a bit, because there's a whole bunch of useful airplanes technologies. For example, the jets, which offer you first fire, or the heavy bombers, which allows it to move 3 spaces instead of 2, and possibly the best one, precision bomb sight, which means you can use your airplanes to bomb the opponent's industry. So, as early as 1938, you can use all these juicy planes to bombard your enemy and catch him off by surprise. So if you get this technology, for example, you can suddenly send some 12 or 16 combat value airplanes and roll as many as 16 dice, which could be allocated either to the enemy's fort or onto the enemy's air forces to deny him the ability to defend the air, or they could be allocated into his industry. And if you roll some 3 or 4 dice of 1, then it will have the devastating effect of lowering the Western player's industry, which start at 7 and could be taken down to here, for example. And I don't think any Western player could come back from some attack of this sort. And you don't have to necessarily eliminate all of his units. You can just abuse this technology to use all your airplanes to target the enemy industry. And industry is a major hindrance to the Western player, so it would be a good value to lower his industrial capabilities a bit. Now, when it comes to the late game as the Axis player, you pretty much have no late game. You have conquered Paris, and that's a very good job, but you have not managed to end the game. And the Western player has possibly brought the Americans into play. And by the way, during these years, it might be a very good idea to search the Axiom deck a bit more and fish out these USA diplomacy cards a bit to delay the Americans for as long as you can. So, during the late game, your pain and suffering begins because you will be attacked from all sides. The British, the Americans, and possibly the Russians. So your best course of action in these cases would be to play for the final scoring or European hegemony. So if we have reached 1944 and the Americans have entered the game, your best course of action would be to possibly try to hold them at all fronts and manage to keep your production level a bit higher, because typically your industry might be somewhere like here, and if you can reach this level, maybe you can deny the enemies some resources or population and win the game purely on victory points.